handle risk in your project and how you address upstream and downstream. So to start with today's question, first of all, let's see what is risk. So a risk is basically something that can hamper your project success. Okay, so it can be anything, we can say, that can prevent your project to be successful. So now next is what is risk management? So risk management in Agile is the process of identifying, analyzing, prioritizing, and responding to the potential threats and opportunity that may affect the project goal, scope, quality, or anything. So together with Scrum team and stakeholder, first of all, we have to make a list of known risks, discuss the probability of occurrence and impact on your product or feature. The second step can be categorize whether the risk is business, market, technical, architect related, anything. So categorize the risk. That is helpful while working with Scrum teams. So the most important part of this is discussion that may bring value. So after that, create some strategies on how to manage these risks. Is it worthwhile to pay attention to the specific threat? Okay, so the Scrum Master is in charge of ensuring that the team functions without any impediments or the way on the way. Like Scrum Master is the one who is responsible to remove the impediment. So he or she ensures that the team functions without any impediment. So therefore, in this is how we can handle risk in five steps. So we have 5 steps in which we can handle a risk. These are the 5 steps that I use to handle a risk in my project. So the first step is risk identification. With the help of a Scrum team, we have to identify the risk. What is the risk? Risk identification is a constant process, and identified risks even become input to many Scrum processes. Okay, the next step is risk assessment. After identifying the risk, you have to now understand what the impact of each risk may be on the project. So the overall business value is calculated. The third step is risk prioritization. As a result of first 2 steps, we have to prioritize the risks. So you have a list of all the possible risks which could impact the project and an idea how a big each risk is. So in this step, we have to prioritize the risks based on the chances of occurring and implication. The fourth step is risk mitigation. So risk can be mitigated by using a number of responses from Scrum, from which the best option is to formulate a plan B for you. So we have to always ready with a mitigation plan. The fifth and the last most step is risk communication. Every project has a lot of stakeholders who are involved in our project. So that stakeholders who are worried about how the project is progressing. So it is important to communicate these stakeholders, not just the owners, about the risks and their potential impact on the project. So you should also explain the measures you have taken in order to mitigate the effects of the risk. So once we have identified the risk and we have followed all these 5 steps, so we have to always refine the list frequently and adapt accordingly. Otherwise, our risk list will become obsolete, and the list of risk will be more risky if it will become obsolete. So we have to update our risk list and visit our list in every sprint. Okay, so now the next thing is like where we can identify this risk, when we can identify this risk. So as we all know, Scrum events are empirical and support risk management. So risk can be identified at any time. We don't need any special meeting or anything for risk identification. It can be identified at any time. So we can use Scrum events also to identify and manage the risks. So during daily Scrum, the team can also discuss in the terms of discuss risk in terms of reaching the sprint goal and other items that are to be delivered. Throughout sprint planning, we can also we create a forecast, sprint backlog, and a sprint goal. So a forecast is all about uncertainty, and thus risk the risk can be identified there as well. So when creating sprint backlog and sizing product backlog item, we are evaluating risk as a part of that discussions. The third thing is sprint review. Sprint review is ideal occasion to discuss business and technology risk while we are giving our demo. Okay. So such conversation might impact your upcoming product backlog items. And the fourth thing is sprint retrospective that contains fruitful conversation about what to improve as a Scrum team in the next upcoming sprint. So the sprint itself is in place to reduce risk through it inherits desire to create empirism. So the other activity, that is product backlog refinement, is also an excellent opportunity for the Scrum team and stakeholder to include a discussion about risk. So we can also use risk burn down chart to track these risks. The primary benefit of risk burn down chart is that they enable us to explicitly show how our risk profile is trending over time. So the example of risk can be scope creep, budget issues, people issue, etc. Now let's see a real-time example of risk. So a woman gets into her car in the morning and notices that the diesel level is low. So she chooses to drive to work regardless without stopping at a gas station. She chooses to go to a work in that amount of fuel itself. She don't want to refill it or take any backup option of it. She just choose to go as it is. And by making this choice, she is risking that she will run out of diesel in her car on the way to work. So in this real-time example, there can be two scenarios she can do. First is she can have a mitigation plan for this, but she has not chosen that. Otherwise, what she has done is she has taken some backup fuel in her car with her. If any time the fuel got exhausted, so she can refill it, but she has not taken that. So this is the mitigation plan that she can plan for this kind of risk. Now we can handle risk in two different ways. So the first is mitigation plan and the second is contingency plan. So a mitigation plan is designed to proactively identify and address risk before they occur. A mitigation plan outlines strategies to reduce the likelihood of risk event occurring and minimize its impact if it does. So basically, mitigation plan is a plan B for the risk that you have already identified. Now, the second is contingency plan. A contingency plan is typically implemented when a specific risk event occurs. You don't have any plan for the risk before. You are waiting for a risk to occur, and it outlines a series of actions to be taken to mitigate the impact of the event. So now let's see the second part, follow-up question of this question, like how you address upstream and downstream. So I would like to invite Deepika for that.
Yeah, thanks, Neha. It was very wonderful, like points highlighted regarding risk, how we manage, how to identify, how to manage, and everything. So let's get started with what upstream and downstream dependencies are. So let me start with the definition, or you can say, I will just try to brief what upstream dependency is. So upstream dependency are kind of tasks that must be completed before your project can start something. And the downstream dependency is the vice versa. Like, so there are certain tasks that your project must deliver before something else can start. So to not to confuse, I will just start with one example. So let's say we have created an API that help users to find discounts on tickets and then serves this data through text message to the specified number. In order to serve this information, the API acts as a middle processor, and it needs to pull the data from external source and then push the data to the user in the specific format. So our API in this case is middle of the stream of information, where the user will be at the ultimate downstream position, waiting for the data that to be processed. So what happens is when the API grabs the pricing data, it reaches out to the local provider API to pull most of the like I mean to say the current price details. So this is the upstream data source. Okay, as it feeds the API for the processing. Once the API process this data, it needs to send to end user. So all the details, maybe you can correlate with your real-time example while booking any tickets or any reservations, how this is happening. So it will be easier for you to understand what exactly is upstream and what exactly is downstream. So here in my example, I'm giving end user as a downstream, and the data and API is in the middleware. Okay. So these dependencies, I can say these are not as we exactly think. It cannot always be very clear. It can be in terms of various requirement dependencies. It can be in terms of APIs, systems, entities, few libraries. So it depends. So but what we have to mainly consider or worry about here is whether or not it is required to input to the system or to output from the system. So this is categorizing this difference is very much important. So when you are trying to identify this, then you're clear with what upstream and downstream dependency in your system. What is more complex here is not all dependencies are clear, as I said. So we need to have lots of coordination within the team to identify these dependencies. Maybe we can plan certain strategies to identify these uh, dependencies and then try to implement that in our project. For example, we can have in Jira level the entry or exit criteria. So entry criteria maybe when how or when you can accept some task. So before you start something, you should have there should be some entry point if at all there is an upstream or downstream dependency, and exit criteria. In order to say that you are complete or done, you should have some exit criteria so that other team can accept some work. So like this, you have to standardize the process, and we have to make sure that we have to get the specific dates from the team whom we are working it can be external team whom we are working with in terms of DevOps, or it can be DB team or some team. So we need to have some specific dates, and we have to set the delivery expectations with them appropriately. Only then we can track this risk in a proper fashion, I can say. So how in my project we manage all these upstream or downstream dependencies? It can be, as you said, the risk. So you gave a wonderful idea like a risk burn down chart. But here in my project, we are using a RAID board where we capture all the risk, issues, actions, and also most importantly, after identifying, as you said, we have to make sure that who is owning that risk and who is responsible, who is accountable, or who should be informed. As you said, communicating that risk is very much important. So how effectively we are communicating that risk also matters here. So plan the strategy accordingly, get the due dates so that there will be no conflict or there will be no assumptions that is impacting our timelines. So when we are trying to work with these dependencies, it is very much important for us to revisit on the dates or the timelines. If not, it will kind of create a blockers and we will not be able to make any progress with the our task. So what we follow as a scrum master is we try to have a daily cadence with the team whom we are working with, and try to understand what is the initial dependencies and try to perform some impact analysis, how it is impacting, whether it is in terms of timelines alone or any other risk, as you mentioned. So all this impact analysis, and once should be done after identifying the risk, how we are going to address it. So we have to make some team members accountable and try to resolve this risk. It is not just identifying or capturing in the red book, but we should also try to mitigate and also try to implement it and track it in an efficient way, so that we will not be blocked in any way to deliver our project successfully. So this is my viewpoint, and thanks team, thanks everyone who are watching. So please share your viewpoints and also hit like and comment. Thank you, Neha.
Thanks.